Hello, everyone, and welcome to Voices in the Code, Episode 3. It's a little bit of a special episode today because we have our first guest, due to us both hitting 1,000 subscribers roughly around the same time. Friend of the channel, you guys have seen him on the Discord before if you're there. The data collector himself, Warp Friends. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So today's going to be an episode that I've been meaning to do simply because I've seen a lot of contention online about stats, right? Like just a lot of people like to look at values and just say, hey, my army's bad, or I don't know what this means, I'm just going to disregard it. And I know that I was guilty of it, especially with like the XO, X1 stuff. But before we get into all that, YouTube pleasantries for me, at least, if you're interested in being included in monthly giveaways for combat patrols, units, yada yada yada, you can check out the Patreon there. Sometimes I live stream battle reports if you want to watch games. As for Warp Friends, if you'd like to plug yourself in here.
Yeah, you can find me at Warp Friends on YouTube. Weekly meta reports for Warhammer 40k. Looking at getting into Age of Sigmar here soon too, maybe. So just starting that process. And I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/warpfriends. You can come check me out, and any support is greatly appreciated.
Sweet. Are you an Age of Sigmar player as well?
Getting into it. I'm
Yeah.
it's we started with Spearhead, me and my brother-in-law. So it's really fun.
Gotcha.
It's an interesting game. It's nice and streamlined, and I think 10th or 11th should pull a lot from Age of Sigmar from what I've experienced so far. Enjoy playing it.
Yeah. I've had decision paralysis about making a Ossiarch Bone Reapers army or a Slaves to Darkness one, and I finally, just today actually, I bought a battle force for the Ossiarch Bone Reapers. I think it's called the Praetorian Spearhead or something.
You didn't go with the you didn't go with the Soul Blight with all the new models coming out.
The way that I got into fantasy was through Total Warhammer 3, and I don't really like vampires. Vampires aren't my thing, but I do like the whole like death rattle skeleton part of it because I love skeletons. It's just that a lot of the Soul Blight seems to be more of like ghouls and vampires and zombies than it does skeletons. So I kind of like the bony aesthetic more of the Bone Reapers, even though they kind of look a little weird sometimes.
They're pretty neat army.
What's up?
I was gonna say they're pretty neat army.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that they're also like kind of like Custodes in a way, like they're mega elite. I feel like I can get into them a lot faster because God knows that I've been building AdMech for like 4 years, and I'm still like, getting to the point where I can have a sizable 2,000 point army with stuff that I can switch out. Because right now I'm basically stuck to a list, right? So I figured I already have Chaos in 40k. I really like the Chaos aesthetic in the fantasy side, but I might as well do something a little different, and what better than a unique faction to Age of Sigmar like the Bone Reapers. So bought it today. We'll see how long it takes to get it up onto the board, but I'm looking forward to it for sure.
I mean, bone is easy to paint, so
that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
But I've also heard people say that dry brushing is easy, and I just can't do it. I don't know what it is. I cannot figure out how to fucking dry brush.
You'll get a lot of practice.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, because people say like rub it out until it basically doesn't have anything left on the brush, and then I'll apply it and then nothing goes on to the model, and I'm like, did I brush out too much? That's what they told me to do.
I don't know. It's a layering process. I do it. I kind of do it like that, and I hit it as I go a little probably more aggressive than I should, but I don't know. I'm not an expert at it, but
yeah. And I noticed too that like when I'm painting in like not well lit environments, like for one thing I did for my AdMech army when I first started is I would do red robes, and then I would do a dash of orange on like the bottom to make it look like dust is kicking up, and I could almost never see it until the model dried, and then you could see just how whatchamacallit, just how much of the dry brush you actually put in, and 9 times out of 10 I did it way too heavy-handed. So I don't know, I tend to fuck it up more than usual, and I just at this point I'm like, I'm just gonna airbrush. Like it's way easier that way.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's just that I like the I know that Nids players do this a lot. When they dry brush, it gives it that kind of like heavy I don't know, like it's the, I guess, the dry feel to it, right? Whereas a dry brush, I feel it does more of a gradient, right? So texture, that's the word I'm looking for. A dry brush seems more textured.
Yes.
And I want to learn how to do it, but I just suck at it. I don't know. I'm bad, I guess. But before we get into the subject of analytics and all that, let's start with you. So I wanted to know the 5 W's of why you started Warhammer, which is who, well, you, what, where, when, and why.
Okay, well, yeah, so me, I started back when I was like in grade 10, maybe 9. Granted, I don't really know what I'm doing. You know, you're just a kid. You're just buying models because you think they're cool, and you're making your own game up. And so I kind of put them on the shelf for a while. And then when I got out of high school, got my first job, probably like 14, 15 years ago now, I was just like, you know what? One of my coworkers was talking about it. I'm like, I remember that. So I dug out my old models. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So I bought some stuff and met some great people at my LGS, became really good friends with them, played with them a lot, you know, spent about 4 or 5 years deep into it, and then kind of fell out of it for a bit. And then about 2 years ago, around the same time, weirdly enough, my brother-in-law was just like, hey, like, I was thinking about doing this because we were playing D&D, and I'm like, so was I. Yeah. I was getting that itch, and so he just got into the hobby for the first time, so it's been really fun. You know, going through all the steps with him and learning, and we've sort of made a table and collected all the stuff together, and you know, it's been a really good time. Just getting our feet wet in it, and we're learning Age of Sigmar at the same time. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the journey. I've been a Chaos Demons player ever since forever. I've dabbled in some few other armies here and there. I have some orcs. I had some Eldar, got rid of them, but through and through, it's been Khorne Demons pretty much the entire time. So as you can see by my
good choice.
By my little avatar that I've requested, they're my favorite. They'll always be my favorite. So
yeah, I don't know. I always took you as like a Tzeentch person, but I always take most people as Tzeentch people when they say they play demons, because I think. Me personally, I think that Tzeentch has the most like attraction when it comes to people getting into demons for the most part. I always hear like, "Oh, I saw the Lord of Change and I was sold." You know what I mean? That's usually what I hear from demons players.
Yeah, it's one of the two. Like you have a Khorne, which is like your demon persona. Like when you think of a demon, that's what Khorne is, and then you have the craziness, which is like Tzeentch, and then the other ones like Nurgle and Slaanesh. They're for a more niche crowd, depending on what your aesthetic is. Not everyone likes Nurgle, not everyone likes Slaanesh, but I feel like everyone can sort of pull into one of Tzeentch or Khorne pretty easily and be like really into those models.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Khorne. I think Khorne is still my favorite god, and I do like the normal heavy hitting demon archetype of like hellishness, right? Yeah. But I find myself always getting more attracted to Nurgle. Like when I played them in Warhammer 3, I had a way more fun time with them. I like their like very I guess tanky playstyle that they tend to have in every single iteration of Nurgle. It's just the fucking models, man. Some of them are just way too ugly. You know what I mean?
There's some bad ones there.
That's what. Yeah, but that's why I like the mortals of Nurgle, like the little helmets with the eyes that kind of almost look like little empty spider drone eyes. I love that aesthetic of like a shell of a human sort of, but they're in this huge armor. Is usually my favorite part of Nurgle, and I think that me personally, I like the iteration again of fantasy as opposed to 40k, because I feel like whenever I see a Plague Marine, they don't really have too much of that aesthetic. Some of them do, like the Lord of Contagion looks awesome. Some of the demons in 40k do a little bit of a better job, I think. Like for instance, I don't like Plague Toads, but like Mephitic Blight Haulers are cool as shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like that's kind of like where I pull from Nurgle. But no, 100% with you there. I love Khorne. Khorne is absolutely my favorite. He's just so simple. Like you can't hate a concept like that.
Speeds up the game, man. I don't have to do any shooting.
Yeah. I haven't played Khorne ever in tabletop, so I hear he's kind of boring, and I know that's one of the reasons why I held off on buying a Dark Angels Battle Force when they came out for Christmas, because I was like, oh, Khorne's gonna get an army soon, and World Eaters more specifically. But then I saw more and more gameplay of the World Eaters, and I just don't think I like it. It just looks kind of boring. I guess it's kind of cool to one tap something, but I don't know.
It's very stagey, very like you know. With I'm sure you have a lot more going on when you're doing AdMech. Like there's just so many more things you can do because so many interactions and rules. And it's like for me, I'm just like, okay, line up my charges. Okay, we're charging, and my turn's done. And I like I love melee. Play any game, I always do melee. So it's been right up my alley, and I haven't left it.
So one of the things that I've always kind of had contention with, this is like a personal thing that gets me in a lot of trouble, is I don't like how the 8-bound look. Everyone always just fucking attacks me when I say that. And it's because like I feel like the models, like the idea of like a circular saw going through your hand is cool as shit, don't get me wrong. But they have like weird like arms and feet, like they almost don't look good, like in terms of modeling. They just look a little bit way too goofy, and I think that the sleeveless power armor doesn't look as good as something like a Slaughter Priest or something from like the fantasy side of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I feel like the whole shirtless look with like chains looks a lot cooler than the power armor, half power armor type of aesthetic that the World Eaters have right now.
Yes. I don't see. I've never really done World Eaters, and I'm kind of with you. I never really fallen into that aesthetic. Like I think some of them are okay here and there, but I definitely think the Age of Sigmar stuff is a lot more thematic and a lot more on brand than the 40K stuff. It feels more organic and more natural. You're like, yeah, this is what a crazy person with a sword or a ball and chain would do, not some juiced up space marine.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that model, but it's like a Khorne warrior, chaos warrior, but instead of like a flail with a ball and chain or something like that, it's like a flail with a giant hammerhead at the end of it. It is like that's like the perfect marriage of goofy and still trying to be somewhat serious and grimdark in my opinion. Whereas like the World Eaters are just kind of like bigger chain blade or something, you know what I mean? Or chain fist or whatever the fuck, eviscerator. But no, in the demon side of Khorne though, way better in my opinion. Like Bloodthirsters, their models are kind of old, but they look sick as shit. Bloodletters are like I'm with you there. Bloodletters are also my favorite like demon in terms of like I guess infantry, so to speak. I don't know if I'd say they're my favorite demon overall. That might have to go to the Mutalith Vortec Beast. But Bloodletters are cool shit.
Pretty cool.
Skull Taker is cool. His name's Skull Taker, right?
Yeah.
The bigger Bloodletter. Yep. Yeah, they're all really, really sick. But I think a good transition to this is after gushing over demons so much, I think I have already gotten Lily's opinion on it. But where do you stand with how the implementation of Chaos Demons is going forward? Because I'm not a fan of it personally, but I can imagine you probably have a little bit more to say as the Demons player.
Yeah, it's been a up and down edition. Like going through it, and you out of nowhere they're like, they won't be getting a codex, and then everyone just starts freaking out. And then, but here's a bunch of detachments, and you're like, okay, great, but how long is this gonna last? Like, they're good for 10th edition, and you're like, okay. And then you can kind of see where they're going, and then they release the Emperor's Children stuff comes out, and you can see the like, oh, we put demons in here. I'm like, but you put 3 demons in there, and then they legend some stuff, and you're like, Karnak's gone? He just got a new model. And they're like, no, that was a mistake. I'm like, okay, what is happening here? And like, there's so many, like, I'm part of a Demons Discord, and there's so many players, and looking at the stats, and they're like, representation is like above the average, and you're like, there's so many Demons players. Why are they doing what they're doing? It doesn't make. And I know a lot of it is political within the company, and they'll never admit to it, but that's just what it is. And they just don't want Age of Sigmar sales to bleed into 40K sales, so they kind of want to separate them as best they can, and they're kind of drawing that line in the sand. But it's such a integral part to 40K. It's what make 40K 40K, like the warp and demons and the gods. And if you suck that out of it, it takes a lot of the sort of heart and soul of what makes it so terrifying to be in that universe, and like, every race, every faction, every person is just like, this is the thing that's like the boogeyman, and like it feels like it's going away. And as Demons players, it's very concerning, because I've been playing Demons since the end of 5th edition, and I mean, it's every codex is just, they don't know what to do with it. Every codex is different. The mechanics are generally the same, but like when I first started playing, the whole army had the deep strike. Like I didn't get to put anything on the board, and back then you could scatter and lose your troops to falling into a terrain piece or another enemy. Like it was just wild. And every time they tried something new, and they never quite got it, and they do that with other armies, but it doesn't. I don't know if they just like, we're tired of it. But then they release these really great detachments. Like all these detachments, not all of them are like, bangers and the best thing ever, but they're fun and they're on brand, and it's never been a better time to be a Demons player, but it's also like very worrisome, as you don't know if you're going to be there in a year when 11th rolls around. And are they going to put you in World Eaters? Am I going to have one detachment I can play in World Eaters? And then that's because that's what it looks like right now, right? So, and looking at Age of Sigmar, the Khorne faction, they only have one battle formation, I think is what it's called, battle formation, that has demons, that allows demons, and it's the only one that's full demons. So, and they don't even have that in 40k. So it's a lot going on, and it's every time something's released, it's a new set of panics and people coping, or people trying to come up with reasons for this or that. So I'm just enjoying it while we have it, and we'll have to. There's nothing I can do about it. I encourage any Demons players out there to write a polite and respectful email to Games Workshop, stating your love for the faction, stating why the times that you're in have maybe caused you concern as a player and as a purchaser of their products. And Deathwatch got a detachment back because people loved that detachment, and they voiced their opinion, and Games Workshop actually listened. And it's all we can do is voice our opinion of, hey, don't take this from us. This is our faction. Like people identify, like you with AdMech. Like I remember hear you say you had an AdMech tattoo. Like people don't just do that.
Oh yeah.
People don't just do that over something they just play, right? Like that is your like go-to. That's what you identify with, and having that seeming like it's going to be taken from you is kind of a scary thing. And it's just a game, but it means a lot to a lot of people, and you don't want to lose that. So hopefully things can get sorted out. Games Workshop has seemed to make some adjustments recently that seems like they're listening to people. Doesn't always go the way you want it to, but they've been much more responsive this edition than they have in any times that I've seen them pass. So I have some hope that stuff's going to get sorted out, but it's a dubious future for me.
Yeah, I remember thinking about how this is basically going towards the direction of Age of Sigmar, where you have like the Maggot King of Nurgle, the Blades of Khorne, yada yada yada. And I feel like maybe it's a better fit for that, because you have a dedicated range of like, mortal followers, and then you have the demons as well. Now, I can't speak for how the game in Age of Sigmar runs with like a demon detachment, because I obviously don't know. But it just, I mean, I 100% agree with you with the big bad thing, right? I don't really understand why demons has to get axed when they are very well proving the fact that they can make detachments for this army. And then, in my opinion, it's that now that they're introducing both World Eaters last edition and Emperor's Children this edition, and they did a fairly half-assed job with developing a good range, that they're going to pull from demons to try to fill out the range and make it good. The problem with that is that you're killing an army, and a very, very prominent army at that. Especially the fact that not only are you killing this army, and not everything is guaranteed to move over, right? Like as we saw with some of the Slanesh stuff that got cut. If I remember correctly, there was some resin chariots, not resin, sorry, some plastic chariots that were getting cut while some of the resin models made it through, and it was like, what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The models that probably have the most justification to get axed are still going through, and the others aren't.
That's a nightmare of a model. We have my wife is getting into the hobby too, and she's doing Slanesh Demons because it's like, you know, like you can play with me, you know, I can help you, and like, you know, it's just something we can do together. And you know, she got a couple of the old Battle Force boxes for Slanesh Demons. They're like way out of print now, but we found some at a local game store here, and they come with the chariots, and you can build them 3 different ways, but they don't have instructions on. Like it's just a mess of a kit. And but I think that's why they tried to pull it, but then they brought it back because everyone like was like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, oh, whoops, we didn't mean to do that.
I also like, I've noticed that there hasn't been much. I have seen people talk about the Demons things. Like, I think even Poor Hammer Podcast was like, write a letter to GW at the very least. But I see, the thing that's crazy to me is that I've seen a lot of people be like, it is what it is. And then kind of like you mentioned, brought up like the Death Watch thing. And Imperial Agents is something that's very, very difficult to talk about. I know that like in your last video, you basically said that they need to do something to make this codex good, but you just kind of don't think they're going to give a shit at this point. And I see more justification to take something like Death Watch, and hell, I would even go as far as to say Grey Knights, to include them into the Inquisitorial Agent and kind of like mold them all into the quote-unquote demon codex of the Imperium, right? Where you just get the 4 gods, the demons, put them in a book, and then here you go. Because I don't feel like there's enough in like the Death Watch, there's not enough in the Grey Knights to justify like a full book. And then you can drag in like a bit of the Inquisition, considering that the Grey Knights and the Death Watch are part of the Inquisition. And it's crazy that people will fight tooth and nail to get Death Watch back, but then they just kind of throw up their hands and they're like, well, you got 4 detachments for demons, you know, like go enjoy that.
Yeah.
It's like, I think people fail to understand that at the end of the editions, demons is gone. Shadow Legion's not going to be a thing. Demonic Incursion is not going to be a thing. You won't have a list where you can bring 4 demons to the best of my knowledge unless they add it to the CSM book, which there's no guarantee. It just feels weird that the biggest bad guy of 40k and, you know, Age of Sigmar, but is not being fought over, and I guess the concern is not being voiced as loudly as some of the people did for Death Watch. And I would argue, me personally, I think that Death Watch should be consolidated into something else. I don't think that they should have something, you know, solely as their own. I feel the same way about stuff like Salamanders. Apparently Salamanders is going to be a codex that we might get in the future, or a supplement we might get in the future.
Oh my god.
And it just kind of goes against the whole, it goes against the whole, like, you know, we added Firestorm to signify a fighting stance or style of like the Salamanders. That kind of like the same thing in, let's bring it into AdMech. You know, we used to have Forge Worlds, but now we have distinct, I guess, archetypes, right? We don't have Ryza, but we do have the melee detachment to signify Ryza, right? Mm-hmm. It's just weird that that people are willing to scream their heads off over, you know, a couple of Kill Team Terminators, but not for the gods, the demons of fucking 40k. I just don't get it, man. So I think it'll be a hard time for Demons players. I don't know how to sum it up in a way that's just kind of like, don't worry, guys, you know, because I think it's, at this point, it's only worry. And I don't like the fact that, say, a Demons player, me, who likes to dabble in every single little army, but specifically a Demons player in this instance, where you might have a little bit of Khorne, a little bit of Nurgle, a little bit of Slanesh, and you can kind of like take what you want to make a list. And now it's like, well, you want to play Nurgle today? Well, you go buy the Death Guard Codex. And, oh, well, tomorrow, you know, you built this Demons collection where you can take multiple demons, but now they're split into 4 ways, and that's 4 different codexes that you have to buy. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think the idea there is, okay, well, say you're like the Khorne Demon player. Well, now you have to buy the World's Eaters Codex if you want to play Khorne Demons. Why don't you pick up some 8-bound while you're at it? And I don't think that's going to play out the way that GW expects it to play out. I really think that people, I mean, maybe you can answer this now, like, as a Demons player who plays a lot of Khorne, do you think that you're even going to bother dabbling into some World Eaters, or do you kind of see it as like a, No, fuck that. I play demons. I don't play world eaters.
Yeah, that's exactly how it is for me personally. I don't really have the like. I'm not like anti-Space Marine. It's just not my thing. And
Right.
like the Sigmar, Age of Sigmar, like aesthetic. Like I love the fantasy aesthetic, but just the game of 40k drew me in originally, and this is the closest I could get to like a fantasy style army. It's all just hit them with swords and that type of stuff. And it's just Space Marines just don't do it for me. So I'm not gonna get World Eaters no matter what. Like if they roll it into it, then I'm just gonna play their one detachment they give us, and that's what I'm gonna do. And hopefully, I should say, and that's it. It's not gonna entice me to buy any additional models like from World Eaters. Now, there's plenty of players who play both, but for me, that's not going to do anything for me.
Yeah, I think that's what GW was maybe trying to do. To be like, well, I mean, hey, like if you play Nurgle, or let's use Slanesh and World Eaters as the best example here because they don't have a fully fleshed out range. I think that the idea there is just to do that. Just that is like to say, hey, maybe this isn't as developed as Thousand Suns or as Death Guard, but you can pull from these mortal units, kind of like they do in Age of Sigmar. But again, it's just you bought a Demons army. You didn't buy a World Eaters army for a reason. Like World Eaters has been available as a warband in CSM for the last couple editions too, and that wasn't enough to convince you then. Like I don't see why consolidating it would be.
Yeah, I don't. So, I don't think. I'm not really sure what the goal is. Like when it comes to that, it's all very confusing. So, right now, like I said, they put some effort into it, which is more than I was expecting, and I'm gonna enjoy it while I can, and I'm gonna do what I can, and in these situations, like put it out there for people to maybe try to do what we can to make a difference. But at the end of the day, it is what it is going to be, and I have to have hope, but I don't have a lot of it, so we'll see what happens come 11.
I think it's weird too how it's very evident that they don't have a problem doing something like consolidating a bunch of shit that doesn't have a home, because they made Imperial Agents this edition. So how can you justify it for the Imperium but not for the Demons?
Oh,
like it doesn't make sense.
You just said it, the Imperium.
I mean,
it's a space. It's a Space Marine adjacent. I mean, the Imperial Agents is like 3 kids in a trench coat. Like that's not a real army. Like they're just like half the lists you look at are like there's a couple Sisters units, there's a couple Grey Knight units. I'm like this is just a weird mishmash. Like no one really plays it. It's not really that popular. It's not really that good. I mean, there are some times when they do good, but I feel like that's just because someone goes up against somebody and they're like, I have no idea what you do. Like, what is this? Like, you play agents? But I mean, you have like Grey Knights, which are the anti-demon Space Marine faction, and they have models that are older than Space Wolves, and Space Wolves got a full refresh, and Grey Knights.
I was just talking about that.
Yeah, Grey Knights got a new mace on their baby carrier. Like, it's it's like, is this going away? Like, are they not putting any effort into them because of like Demons? Like, are they just gonna sort of scale that down and sort of?
Yeah.
It's very confusing. If you're not a Space Marine, you get one intern trying to make new models for you or something. I don't know.
It's so crazy to me. I was just talking about this while I was at the LGS earlier today. There was one guy telling me like, hey, I think that Grey Knights at this point and like Death Watch and everyone should just get cut into Imperial Agents. Like no Grey Knights Codex, nothing, because like what's the point? They're all under the Inquisition to begin with, and that way you can flesh that codex out more. But as of now, it just kind of feels like in the kill team side, they kind of made Inquisitorial Agents and Elusian Starstrider boxes, and they were like, well, where do we fit these guys? And they were like, oh, let's make a codex after them, and then just I don't know, do some shit. Kill demons, by the way.
Yeah,
it's just and it's so crazy to me too. Like because Lily and I did the stream for the reveal of Adepticon, and they were like, oh, the Grey Knights are fighting the demons, and they're being outnumbered. The demon hunters, by the way, are not doing well against the demons. Who will help them? The Space Wolves with the new Terminator armor. And it was like, dog, there's no way that you're trying to say that the Space Wolves are going to help the dedicated elite demon hunters and then not give them a Terminator upgrade kit. Like, that was such a slap to the face. I didn't think that the Imperium players. Sorry, let me rephrase this. I didn't think that the Space Marine, bias would trump even the Imperium itself with the Grey Knights. You know what I mean? Like I can understand if they're like fuck Xenos, we make more Imperium. But now they're at the point where they're like fuck the Imperium and the Inquisition in general, just Space Marine.
Just Space Marine.
That was crazy to me. Yeah, that was wild as fuck when I saw that.
Yeah, you look at those Grey Knight models and they're just little guys with the tiny little torsos, and it's like, oh, this is a sad little army. And they took all their psychic away. I'm like it's just it's such a mess. Like they just neutered the army. They're like, oh, they have a psychic gun. I'm like, that's just a debuff. There's nothing beneficial to having psychic keyword on anything. Just all stuff has like protection against it, and that's it.
I'm glad I didn't get into Grey Knights, because when I was a young little open-eyed boy getting into Warhammer for the first time, I saw Grey Knights and I was like, they look cool as fuck, I want that. And shit. I mean, I guess I'm not that much happier with AdMech right now, but it's better than getting Axe and having no torsos in your models, right? Exactly. So yeah. Grey Knight players, I feel you, man. The Grey Knights are probably the only part of like the Imperium besides AdMech that I give a shit about, because they look cool as shit.
Yeah,
I just have this thing where I never consider the AdMech as part of the Imperium. I know that they are, I get it, but my point is just like, well, they're allies,
they're as close.
They're not like the Imperium proper.
Yeah, they're like as close as they can be without being it. They're weird enough.
Right, yeah.
They're like the weird little stepchild that just like does their own thing.
The red-hooded stepchild.
The red-hooded stepchild. There you go.
Right. Well, shout out to Daemons. I hope they don't explode. Well, they will explode. It's kind of pretty evident now. I hope that their existence continues, even if it's in a very mediocre way, because they are the cooler part of Chaos, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm building CSM right now, and the only reason that I really give a shit about CSM is because of Possessed. Like, I think they look cool as hell, and it's like the demon part of it. My favorite Chaos chapter is World Bearers, because I like the whole like, let's do a sacrifice to bring a demon into real space. That shit's cool as fuck to me. And they look more demonic than they look human. They just look like armored demons, as opposed to like, a bare little blob of pink horrors or something.
Yeah.
Hot opinion, dude. Try telling anyone you like word bears, and they'll just immediately crucify you. Well, the Imperium players will anyway. Everyone else seems to be like, yeah, they're pretty cool. But everyone hates Lorgar. Or not Lorgar. What's his name? Erebus. Yeah,
Erebus.
I don't give a fuck about it. I don't care. I'm just like, yeah, sure. I don't know who he is, but I want to go summon a demon. Right. So let's get into your wheelhouse in particular. Not the demon stuff, but the stats stuff. Well, before we get into that, though, before we get into like learning about numbers and data and shit, what was it that drove you to want to start a channel and to start covering this content? Because as far as I know, the only time that I ever got stats was through like Auspex's occasional monthly video. Mm-hmm. And then I think I just like one day I just saw your video on my recommended, and I was like, what the fuck is this about? And I was like, whoa, this is like Auspex's videos, except they don't take 3 months to come out. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And one of the problems that I had with like Meta Mondays, shout out Meta Mondays, I'm not saying I don't like you. What I am saying is that that chart, I remember having problems reading it because I was like, whenever you scrolled way the fuck down where AdMech belongs, you would lose track of like what was the titles at the top. So I'd have to like scroll way up, follow the line down, be like, okay, that was the XOX1, and then be like, wait, there's two percentages next to each other. What is this? And then I'd scroll all the way back up, and I was like, I just want something that consolidates all the data together, and I can see it and be like, wow, there it is, right? Cool little commentary about why that might be, and then we move on. And that's why I really liked your videos. I saw them and I was like, this is fucking incredible, right? I don't have to wait 3 months. I don't have to play fucking like do like a little line chart, or like play like what felt like Battleship, like I hit at A7, what is the stat? It was just all there. And again, we're both small channels, but You mentioned that you started it recently, and I'm curious to know as to what drove you to take the plunge. I saw you started with Age of Sigmar, if I remember correctly, like one of your first videos.
Yeah. So, all right. So it's a little bit of a long story, I guess. So I've been in IT for 15 years now, and
Okay.
I was kind of looking at like getting into something different, like within the industry, and my wonderful wife was like, "Hey, you're really good with numbers. You like stats. You know, when it comes to like sports or games, or like I'm just focused on numbers, like this, that, like baseball, hockey, whatever, like Warcraft. It doesn't matter what game I play over the years. So many different games. It's all the same as Warhammer." She's like, "This is what you love. Like this is you clearly are interested in this. Why don't you pursue this?" So, we did a little looking, and I found data analytics, and I talked to some people, and I was like, okay, this is it. So, she gave me that push, and I got in. I did some online courses. I just did some stuff on my own, and one of the things they recommend is you create like a portfolio. So it's like, okay, why can I create a portfolio about something that I like? Otherwise, I'm never going to do it. So I saw that, I've been looking at Meta Monday. It's kind of the same thing as you, and I'm like, it's hard to read. And shout out to Meta Monday for the new format he finally created. It's much easier to look at, but it's so, kudos to him. He did a lot of work there, and that's really nice. But I was like, okay, so let's take this, and this is a good thing to learn and to put them into my own little database and create my own formulas and charts and do a whole thing. And then I was like, I think this seems like something people might like. So I made the website, the WordPress, warpfriends.com on WordPress, and I started just posting it under his post because I didn't want to steal his thunder. Like, I'm not like gonna make my own post. I was just like, hey, like check this out. I checked with him first. I said, hey, I'm doing this. You okay with that? And he's like, yeah, go ahead. So I did that, and people seemed to like it. And I did that for a few months, and I kind of just kept evolving it and getting a little bit better at it. And I thought, you know what? I think this is something that I could. Enough people like it. Like, let's, like you said, there wasn't this content out there, and I wanted to make the data informative but easy to understand, and something that you can just look at and go, got it. And if you want to dig into it, you can dig into it, and if you don't want to dig into it, you can just look at it and go, hey, here's my thing compared to everyone else. I can see it, I know what's going on, and I can move on. And like, you don't have to go through all the effort, like you said, to sort of scroll around and compare numbers, because numbers can be very daunting, and I think people on a whole are very visual. So that's why I kind of went to the graphs. And so I just and then with those first Age of Sigmar ones, it was more of a practice on formulas, and I was like trying to make my own like damage calculator thing. So I made that, and then I was like, this is like not really what I want to do. It doesn't really feel right. So then I was like, okay, let's take these charts, let's sort of refine them into something I can do into video. And I just made the first video, and like it went like, I got like, for the first video I ever put out there with it, it was like 1,500 views or something, and people were like overly positive. And I was like, okay, there might be something, people like this, there's something here. And I, if I've refined it, and so far it's been nothing but pretty positive feedback from people. They really like what it is, and you shouted me out, and I saw all those comments coming through like early on being like, hey, like I came from here. So I reached over and like I was like, what's going on with this guy? And like, oh, this is like this is a great little community. Like, I joined your Discord, and everyone's like really nice, and everyone really likes and appreciates it. And it just kept me coming back, and it just helps me like practice like new skills. And I enjoy, like, I love talking about stats, I love looking at stats, and it doesn't seem like effort when it's something you love. And that's where it kind of came from. It's just kind of like fulfilling a little niche that I didn't think was there, and hopefully giving people what they like and something that's enjoyable. And it seems to be working out so far. So pretty happy with everything that's happened. And I guess, long story short, I got here thanks to my wonderful wife, who gave me that push, gave me that encouragement. Those people in your life, if they give you that nudge, you take it and you run with it, and hopefully this will lead on to bigger and better things. But right now I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, and I wouldn't be here without her, and I wouldn't be Yeah, I wouldn't be here without her, and I appreciate everything she's done, and I appreciate
Yeah, that's
everything
awesome.
the community has done and reached out. So, in the comments there, give a shout out to my wife. Give her a
Yeah.
big thanks. If you appreciate
She,
my stuff, she'll really appreciate
yeah.
that.
This she's a Slanesh player you mentioned.
Yeah, she's getting into it. We've been doing some painting here and there, and
Mm.
so I-
Yeah.
it's
Don't Slanesh and Corn like not get along at all?
yeah, they're kind of opposites, but
Opposites attract.
she likes the color. Yeah, opposites attract. She likes the color scheme. She likes purple. She's very pink and purple and blue and cyan, and that's her stuff. So she enjoys just getting the cool colors out and going to town,
Yeah.
and yeah, no, she's having a good time with it. So
Yeah, I appreciate the color scheme too of Slanesh. As much as I don't like their models, like I'm building a Death Guard army as well on the side, just to fuck around with like purples and blues and pinks. And it's really really fun when all you've been painting is red, which I'm sure you can relate to.
oh my
Because
god,
red gets annoying after a while.
I made an orc like mechanized army with like killicans and stuff like that, and some gorknots and morknots, and halfway through painting it, I'm like, I painted these sons of bitches red. Everything is red. What am I doing? And I can't go back
Yeah.
now. So when I did Age of Sigmar, I did Seraphon as like my army I went with, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing like purples and greens because I love purple and green as a color combo. I'm doing purple, green, and
Yeah.
like some whites, and I'm like, I'm not going back to red. You can't make me.
No, and the thing is that red is such an easy color to paint. I think
is.
it's like red is awesome, right? Until you have to paint literally everything red. Like there is no distinction there. So that's the part that gets really annoying. But no, man, that sounds like an awesome story. I mean, relating to doing the things that you think is fun almost never feels like a job is kind of like that. For my personal account, like I've been video editing for a long time. I don't know if like you've ever played like League of Legends or stuff like that, but they have like the EXE videos where they're like highly edited little spoofs and stuff. That's where I started.
Oh, really?
I actually started also. Yeah. Now they didn't get big, but I made like a whole video about like Rakan and me just like out playing people as Rakan, and then I got into Overwatch where I was covering how to play Soldier 76. Now all those videos are gone, so you won't find them.
It's been scrubbed from the internet.
Yeah, well, I mean they're privated, so I could always just re-release them on my channel if I really wanted to. And they were up in this channel for a very long time. Like this was just my personal channel, and then I turned it into this. So, but yeah, no, I've been video editing for a long time, and like looking back and like even just speaking about it now, it seems that a lot of the videos I've always made was like tutorials. Like I had one on like Soldier 76's Helix rocket damage and his ult, and you know what makes him good, and yada yada yada, while also adding, you know, goofs and gaffs as I tend to do with these videos. But the thing is, like, I always like video editing, so what I used to do is from my Discord, like my close friends that I grew up with, is that they would look forward to me making videos that was basically like either like an anime or a show or something that I would change to be like basically throwing shade at them in a way, like you know, being funny. So I'd be like, oh, my friend Trey is like, and then I'll release that video to my Discord, and they would all be like, oh, you know, he made a video, let's see how he, like, you know, makes fun of one of our friends. And like that little hype was like kind of cool, even just within like a friend group of 5 people, just to make a little video just like kind of, you know, clowning on them. But I ended up really liking video editing. I think it's a lot of fun to do those little like kind of crude animations that you see in the videos that I make now. And you know, there was a point where I've said this quite a bit. There, much like you, there was a niche in the community. And for me specifically, it was like AdMech. There is like 0 AdMech creators. There's a lot of competitive AdMech players that do content, but they don't make AdMech content. Like Richard Siegler from Art of War is a perfect example. He's like the AdMech guy, but like he doesn't cover AdMech content all the time. So I figured I really want to video edit, but I need an excuse to do it. I want to talk about AdMech, even though, you know, like nobody makes fucking content for them, and I didn't want to stick around waiting like when's the next AdMech tier list coming out for Auspex. And then sometimes he would cover things and I'm like, he's not wrong, but like, you know, there's things to consider. You know what I mean?
You can't. He's very, you know, you can't be like a generalist and sort of get that satisfaction of he's really good. Like the amount of effort and work he puts in is just mind-boggling. But like It's
Yeah,
very
okay.
it's very generalist, you know, like
Yeah,
and when
yeah.
you want that detail, he can't really give that to you, and that's I think where like your channel comes from. Like I'm not a AdMech player, but I enjoy watching your stuff. It actually helps. I find it informative. I find it funny. I like
Yeah.
your last video that came out. It had that song in it. I was at the beginning, and I was like, oh, I haven't heard that song in 15 years. I'm like, that son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Oh God. And I'm like just stuff like that. Just like I'll remember that. Like that sticks in my head, and it just
Yeah, yeah.
it's fun. And you did that like um, was the April Fool's one, and I still like every once in a while I'll just be like, did you jump through the hoops of Saturn or whatever? I'll just like that'll pop into my head, and I'll just see that little image you did. And it's like stuff like
Yeah.
that's fun, and it sticks with you, and it like makes you remember, and it's it's good, and it gets me more knowledgeable on something I wasn't knowledgeable on. Like I don't have any AdMech
Yeah,
players
yeah.
around, so I don't really know them that well. And then to watch your stuff, it's good. It's something I wouldn't branch out to normally, but doing it and learning is great. And you make it fun and you make it accessible and informative, and that's what I want.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that has been a challenge with my channel, and I'm sure that you face a similar challenge, maybe like the opposite of it though, but in the sense of when you corner yourself to making a faction, you very much need to have people click on your video for a reason that isn't already I like this faction. And I found that like when I was watching a Pure Tide program or the Red Path, which is Tau and World Eaters respectively, that I would click their videos and then they would speak to me as if I already knew what the army did. And it was very like unengaging, I guess, because it's some guy can sit there with a camera and tell you like, hey, this is what makes this unit good, and you're just like, or not even what makes this unit good, but this is the combos that are good or whatever, and you're just like, yeah, but what does that mean? You know what I mean? So my aim was always like, make the video funny, right? It has to be funny at the very least, at least to capture people who don't even know anything about AdMech to be like, oh, that's kind of funny, while explaining to them what things do. And I would assume that with like yours, it's probably a little bit difficult to say like try to add any sort of entertainment value when you're kind of just poking at numbers in a in a chart. Like, because you mentioned to me that like one of the problems that you have is like people will just kind of like look at the stats and be like, okay, cool, and then click off your video. And that kind of sucks, because I watch your video to its entirety because I like to keep up with like what's going on in the meta, right? But I can imagine that some people would just kind of be like, okay, it shows that Emperor's Children have a 56% win rate, therefore they're broken, cool, bye, right? And we'll touch on that later, because we're going to go over as to why we should watch your videos to their entirety, because that is what helps paint a big picture. I know that I've noticed also in like, well, two things. One, I've noticed in your comment section, people will be like, what's XOX1? And I was like, I remember not knowing what that meant either. So we'll cover that. But two, I remember, I think it was your last video, you did the faction focus on AdMech. And I was like, look at you. You actually know what is wrong with the army now. Because I remember the first time you covered them, you were like, yeah, I don't really know what's going on with them, but maybe they can get some help. And then the last video, you were like, stand up for AdMech. These guys need help. Fuck everyone else. And I was like, hey, look at you. Look at our boy. He's popping off. He understands. So I guess I definitely highlighted what's wrong with the army. But yeah, let's start kind of deviating our way into the core of your videos, which is like the fundamentals of what makes these numbers important and why we should care, right? Again, I've seen a lot of people that are just, very easily willing to look at a number and say, hey, now my bias has been confirmed, or now I have an opinion that will not sway simply because I watched a video that said, I don't know, Imperial agents this week. I mean, even outside of the context of this week, some people might click your video and be like, oh, Imperial agents, had the highest win rate this week, therefore they're broken, and not realize anything else, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think both. Let's start with breaking down basically what it is that you cover with every single individual graph, and how that relates to the bigger picture of forming an opinion that is wholly within the context of how an army plays, and whether they should have a buff or not, or whether they are struggling or not. I think a perfect example right now is like Tau. Like, I remember Tau being middle of the pack, and they didn't get much changes, and now they're like really, really struggling. And that's something that I've personally had a problem understanding why. I know the problems with Tau. I just don't know why they're at the bottom now, when they were so middle of the pack a couple of weeks ago. So just kind of a situation to form around while you explain everything that you kind of cover in your videos.
All right, yeah, so there's a lot to get into there. So I guess, like you said, I guess the first thing we'll kind of start with is the stats that I cover and kind of why I cover them, I guess. So, you know, there's the big two stats. You have like win percentage, which is everyone's favorite, and that's just a good general view of an army. And you have representation, which is what I do it by percentages. People sometimes ask for numbers, but I feel like when you're looking at something and you're going, this army had 622 players and this army had 300 players, but you don't know, like, you have to have everyone together, and percentages are like, here's what it should be average, and okay, Space Marines this week had 7.5%. They're twice as much as the average should be. So there's a lot of people playing Space Marines, and that just gives you that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I really appreciate that, especially when it comes to Army Rep, because I remember, like, looking at Army Rep and being like, okay, but what's, like, a good number? And I know that in every video you cover, I think you said Army Rep is 7% is the average, right?
Yeah, it's like
just about
3.7, like 3.6,
3.7.
Yeah, 3.6, 3.7, and like, see, the thing with numbers is like every week that changes depending on how many people, and it's like, so 1 week 600 could be the average, and 1 week 200 could be the average, and without knowing the context every time you look at it, it doesn't give you the full picture. So it's like, okay, just use average representation. If everything was fair and balanced, this is what it would be. And here's where they are now, so you can see, and every week it's always the same. You know, you have the top 5 who have like 30% of the rep, and you've got the bottom 8 which have like 20% of the rep. So there's and then you can kind of just, all right, like, I go to a tournament, I'm probably going to see these 5 armies most of the time. So and then one of the other stats I do is the XOX1, like you mentioned. I used to do that on its own, but I feel like it doesn't give people would not understand it as a whole, so that's why I kind of made the chart where I clump all 3 stats together and I touch on it there. Yeah. And then that gives a little context to, it's not a perfect chart, but it gives you that, like, okay, like, if you combine all their stats together, you would think everyone should be, the lines should all be even. If someone might be a little higher here, someone might be a little lower there, but ideally everyone would be looking the same, and then you can just get an idea of where an army is succeeding. Maybe they're like last week, just looking at the chart here, Drukhari, 45% win rate, not very good. 1.4% rep, not very good. They have like less than half the average. XOX1, 30%, so very low player count. Wow. So so you have 30% of the players only losing 1 match at a tournament, or not losing at all. And they may not win a tournament, but they're at those top tables, they're doing well, and there's context within XOX1 that I don't have through the stats that I have, because I just don't have that much time and to dig into every single result. They could lose the first game and win the next 4. And so there's like a level of competition variance there, but for the most part, it's like, if someone's still going 4-1, they're still doing well at a tournament. So that's a lot of players for a small percentage of an army for Drukhari. Like, they don't have a lot of players, but a large percentage of their players are doing really well. But that also means that like the rest of the army is people who are playing that army are struggling really bad. So that kind of tells me, okay, there's play there, but you have to be like, everyone always mentions Scary, like, guys like him who just play one army and they know it in and out, and they're going to do good no matter how bad the army is. They're carrying those numbers, and there is play there, but you have to be a faction expert, and if not, you're probably not going to have a good time with that army. If you just see those numbers and go, oh man, they did really well, let's dust them off. Oh, I got smoked because I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know the exact specifics to make this work, kind of thing. And so then I also cover tournament wins, because that's just easy. And I used to cover the stat that I was fiddling around with myself, but I feel like it's the meta health rating. I have it included in my army charts that I made, but I don't cover it as a whole, because I just feel like people don't understand, and it's not going to grab anybody right yet. Maybe in the future, if it picks up some steam and if I can like refine it and maybe explain a little bit better or figure out how to deploy it better. But I mean, that's kind of another version of the like combined stats as well. So.
Yeah, I know that the meta health rating, I like that stat a lot. I remember when I first covered the AdMech card that you made on your first video when you covered them, that it's like your general, like, if you really want to know, right? Because I know like people always say, this is the win rate, therefore this is where they're at. I feel like the meta health rating, compiling the things together and basically saying, this is the number that you should look at, not the win rate, but this number specifically. I know that in my video when I covered it, I had to enunciate the point that like 100 is not out of 100, but 100 is the middle. 100 is like where you want to be ideally, right? And I think AdMech that week was 77%. So it's like, okay, well now we know that they're below the average. So not only does this say that AdMech isn't, 100% win rate they're at 77 out of 100, but they're 77% to the average of where they should be, which can draw a really good picture without having to look at everything individually and scratching your head as to wondering what's going on.
Yeah, it just takes all the stats and I weighed them what I thought was accordingly. So I put a little more like into win percentage and a little bit more into rep and a little bit more into XOX1 and a little bit less into tournament wins, because I feel tournament wins also come down to the player. Like,
right.
Players are going to win a lot of tournaments, and it's always going to be the same general few players if they're going to tournaments. So I don't feel like that's a true indication of sometimes an army, because at the end of the day, like, the driver is the person who's going to win, and people who win tournaments are going to win with any army they show up with for the most part. So so I give tournament wins, it's in there, but it's worth less out of the 100 than the other stuff. So I try to balance it, but I'm still working on it, and I think it is useful. And like you said, I didn't really know how it was received. I never really got any feedback. So when I did see your video and you mentioned it, it was like, oh, okay, people like do look at it, and like people kind of understand. So it's nice to see, that it's not all in vain, and it does make sense. And the vision that I have actually is kind of coming out a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's good. Like I said, it's a good thing to draw, because a lot of people will see I don't remember the name of the detachment, but I know the player John Lennon, he was the one that was playing Space Marines with the Storm Raven, and then it got nerfed next dataslate because everyone thought it was busted. And it's like, no, this detachment really sucks. It's just that he knows how to play the game. Another example was I think it was LVO was won by LSV. That one, I think he's Finnish, but he was using Chaos Veterans of the Long War, and everyone was like, wait, but
they suck.
We all know that Renegade's Raider is broken, and we all know that Pact Bound Zealots is like the strong one. Yeah, but now here's a guy winning with Veterans of the Long War. Like, what? And then you realize, oh, it's LSV or whatever the dude's name is. It's like, shit. Yeah, he's gonna win with it. Same with Skari, right? He's a perfect example. Jakari's bad until Skari plays it.
Yeah, and then Jakari's good.
Yeah, and then we have to nerf him, which was like, what?
Thank God there's no really good AdMech players just winning tournaments. Otherwise, you guys would be like getting sewered.
Well, I mean, right now the AdMech. I'm gonna make a video on this. Spoiler alert for everyone who's watching. But whatchamacallit, right now, Alex E, if you saw the intro of the last video with Taraxi, he's the one that had the face of Jesus. So
is that what that was?
He is considered, yeah. Because the reason I put him in the video was because one, he's like just up there with Richard Siegler for one of the best AdMech players, and one of the lists that he was talking about in Discord was that one, I think it was like 6 months ago, he brought a list of 60 Taraxi, I believe it was.
Oh gosh.
And he's like, never again. Right? But I think he won pretty well with them. I don't know if he got a tournament win, but he was saying that like he was showing the strength of the Taraxi, and that's why he was Jesus heralding forward the Taraxi in that video. But he's the one that won with Cohort Cybernetica.
Oh yeah.
I think it was last week. And right now there's the conversation about, oh, AdMech got a win. AdMech is at 50-something. And now everyone's talking about the Belarus energy cannon being like the choice for the tank. And one of the things that wasn't covered very well by Alex was that was actually a list mistake. He didn't mean to run the Belarus energy cannon. He meant to run the Ferromite, which is the anti-tank that we always use. And then I saw some people online being like, Belarus is broken. And I was like, no. You can't say that Cybernetica... Like, Cybernetica is a good detachment, despite the rule being at the most horrendous shit I've ever seen. But, like, the stratagems, while they are limited only to the command phase, they are very strong stratagems. And he mentioned that that's one of the things that led him to play that army, was because abusing the strength of the stratagems with what we have as data sheets, it could... obviously shows to win tournaments, but yeah, there's just been a lot of people online right now being like, I told you guys you should have taken the indirect cannon. And it was like, right now there's also the discussion about Rust Stalkers, which is probably the video that is going to come out soon, spoiler warning, about what to take with them, because that's always a point of contention too. So I would be very surprised if, say, Alex E winning this tournament led to like a points increase for the Scorpius Disintegrator, because, you know, everyone saw that it was like, oh, it was the energy cannon, that was the different thing in the list, even though it was a mistake, that was the different thing, now we have to nerf it. And it's just like, all right guys, well, hold on, just because AdMech got a win rate of whatever this week doesn't mean anything, because as we saw from Work Friends video, this is the consolidated stats of where the army stands, right?
Yeah.
But getting into that a little bit, I think the most contested stat is XOX1. So in terms of like, I understand how it works basically. You know, did you win X and lose 0, or did you win X and lose 1? But how is that, the thing that I'm curious about personally is how is that weighed versus like a 3-round tournament or a 5-round tournament or whatever the hell else they do, in the sense of like, is XOX1 more important if you do 5 games, or if you do 3 games, or if you do 7 games, however there is? Does that stat then get weighed more heavily, less heavily? Is it more important? Is it less important? I would imagine it's more, considering that like the farther you get into a tournament, it matters more because you've played more games before you reach that XOX1 threshold.
Yeah, so the tournaments, the data that we use, or that I use, is inherently from MetaMonday, which is inherently from Best Coast pairings. Now, he just goes to Best Coast pairings and he gets his data there. And that's what I'm kind of doing with Age of Sigmar, is I go there and I go through each tournament every week. I write down the results from every army and kind of starting to compile my database there so I can move forward with it. And he only uses 5-round tournaments. And he does minimum 20 players, because when you start getting into like 3-round tournaments and you start getting into sub 20 players, it's very the data can get very skewed. Like 3 games is not a good way to get a good expression of talent and a good like there's so many variants in a dice game, especially, that if you go 2-1 at a 3-round tournament, that's, you know, that's not really that doesn't really tell you much, like who you playing. Like you're not getting a full scope of the true results, because you're only playing such a small, like in anything data related, more is better to get a true number of what you're doing.
Right.
The more data you have, the more you can reliably look at it and say, this makes sense. You know, 5 results versus 50, you're going to trust the average of 50 versus the average of 5. And, you know, I think that's where a lot of it comes in, is having, let me see it here, having proper like numbers to go back on. And that's kind of also why I stopped using it as a individual stat, because it's week to week, there's so few numbers, because like so few people do it. So it's hard to really like look at it and go, because you could have an army with 10 people playing it, and if, you know, 3 or 4 people did good with it, that's like 30-40%. That's like wild. That's like way too high. The average
agents, yeah.
Yeah, the average is like 17% roughly. But week to week it varies, but it's usually 16 to 18%, something like that. So, you know, that's why it swings so crazily every week. So I don't like to focus on a week by week basis. I think it's more important as a data slate as a whole, and as the weeks go by, that those numbers sort of start to smooth out and start to even out. And then that's when you can look at it and say, okay, looking at it now, like orcs are at 27%. Okay, that's really high. But that's also, then you have to understand the context of Mordaka was broken as hell. And they're just sort of riding off of that. And then you go down, you look at like, Sisters of Battle, they're at like 11%, and you're like, that's really bad. But their win rate's, it's not the worst. It's 47% roughly. So, it's way better than it was, but they're still not getting good results. They're just living in that mid board. And what this kind of stat tells you is, as a whole, I think it's better to look at it as a whole across a data slate of how an army is doing at tournaments. Like you can look at, say, something with a high win percentage, but a low XOX1 is just a bunch of mid-board bullies kind of thing. Like, you get people going 3-2 and maybe like 2-3, but majority of them going 3-2. They're not getting to those end tables. They're not really going to have a chance of winning a tournament. They're just kind of beating up on the people who lose their first couple of games. They might be good players or have a good list or know what they're doing, but they're not great. So they're not getting those results of like the top players, but they're just beating up on the people who are down at the bottom. And and then you have armies with like a low win percentage or an average win percentage and very high XOX1. It's like, okay, that's when it's kind of like, I mean, if they're both high, that's a scary time to look at it and go, okay, there's probably something wrong there. If they're winning a ton and they're doing really well at the same time, they're really high win percentage, really high XOX1. It's probably not great for the army and for the balance. But
right.
So I think if people want to look at it and just get an idea, it's better to look to stare at the data slate numbers as opposed to the week by week. It's fun to look at the week by week and just see where an army really succeeded, but those true numbers are in the data slate, and you can kind of get a good idea of the armies who are doing consistently well, and those are the ones that probably have something there that's a little overpowered or a little broken that needs to be adjusted.
Right.
Like orcs.
Yeah, I know that I think it was in the quarter one analysis video I did, where I covered the fact that listen, I'm basically known as like a certified Sisters hater now. I'm really not, but I was that's the point that I was trying to draw to people in that video, because I was slamming on Sisters quite a bit. But my point was, Sisters has it rough right now, sure, right, and they had it rough especially before the buffs. But the point that I was trying to make there was, with the changes that they received, yes, that plummets their win rate, but it's very obvious that the player rate went down because people basically abandoned the army. They're not loyal like us AdMech players. And that goes to show that, like, if it looks bad right now, right, but if we look at both the data slate and the edition as a whole, you can see that Sisters is not something to pity, in my opinion. And it's kind of the same with Orcs, because Orcs is a little bit more volatile, but people tend to forget about the Mega Knob meta and how crazy that was, right?
I played against that at a tournament. It was not a good time.
Exactly. And then people will say, well, Orc needs help. And it's like, yeah, maybe nobody likes their army being thrown in the dirt. I made that point clear with the Sisters thing. Like, it was way too much of an overcorrection. But let's not pretend like Orcs or Sisters were not up there at some point, you know what I mean? And I think that when people look at things without the context of just win rate or just a weekly result, they'll look at it and say, well, again, now my bias is confirmed. Now I know that Sisters and Orcs are trash, and now I'm going to go around and say Sisters and Orcs are trash. It's like, well, all right, guys, let's not forget Mega Knob meta. Yes, they're down now, and then we got the Mordaka meta, right? Like, these armies are not being neglected, and it seems pretty obvious. Oh shit, yeah, you're right. Yeah. Orcs has been getting a lot of love this edition, in my opinion.
They have.
Right, and I guess me as a salty AdMech player, I'm always like, yeah, no, AdMech needs help, and people are like, yeah, they do, but have you seen where Sisters is? And I'm like, yeah, I remember when Bringer of Flames was one of the best armies in the game. I do remember that. You know what I mean? But I don't remember when AdMech was top army of the game either. So I think it's important to look at things in context. And that's like your video when you covered, I think it was the data slate. It was that 28-minute long one or whatever. Like, that video was really good at drawing that point, not just for Sisters or Orcs, but like the data slate as a whole. Right, and I think I made that point too in one of my videos. I was like, I'd be interested to see the how well armies did in like Pariah Nexus, right? Because that's like more than a data slate. That's like an entire mission, like a mission set. Because I know that people were saying that AdMech was going to be super busted because we rely on Battleline a lot. It's very Battleline focused, and we already run so much of it that we should have an upper hand. And then we saw that definitely wasn't the case, because a lot of the actions really didn't matter for Battleline specific. It was like very Yeah, like non-important stuff.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes into the next point that I wanted to cover, which we kind of did here. But like trends through the edition, like armies fluctuating a lot, or if they, kind of stayed the same. So kind of broadening. We started at kind of a weekly analysis, and then we kind of were just talking about data slate. But as an edition in a whole, besides orcs, is there a trend that you saw that was like, holy shit, like if you even have that data with you at all, or like if that's something you look forward to doing in the future, looking at the edition as a whole to see, hey, is GW doing good with this? Because 10th has been praised for the well, it's also been slandered, but praised and slandered for the fact that there's a lot of changes month to month kind of deal, or like at least every quarter. Because I think people tend to forget that another kind of hot topic that I have is a lot of people complain that 40k is getting too competitive because they have too many rule changes. But if we look at past editions, we also remember where armies were neglected for an edition, like an entire edition. Like it was like, hey, here's your codex, good luck, right? And then 2 years later, they're still bad. And that was a complaint that was brought up quite a bit. And now it seems like GW is trying to alleviate that, and now we're kind of swinging the pendulum in the other way, where it's like, now there's too many changes, now the game's getting too competitive, my codex is worthless, and it's like, well, I mean, you did kind of ask for this, but with an edition that has so many changes, to skew the numbers around a lot, what is something that you've like maybe noticed about armies, say Sisters way the fuck up there and now they're kind of down, or Necrons, I remember they've been good pretty much all edition.
Yeah, Necrons are always good.
And I'm speaking kind of out of my ass right now, so like I'm just saying, like, I don't know, I think they are. Do you have anything to basically say, like, here's what it is and here's what's maybe interesting about it or not?
All right, so I do have all the I'll talk to all of Pariah Nexus, which goes back to, I believe, July 2nd, 2024.
Yeah,
so
I was living in Japan.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, I think I remember Pariah Nexus coming out right when I was starting to get ready to move back to the States, if I remember correctly. That was July, yeah.
Yeah, so it was right around July 2024. And anything past that, you're looking at the old mission deck, and it's just such a different game that it's not, I don't think it's really fair to like sort of lump everything together. So looking at a whole for the last like 8 months, generally speaking, everything has been fairly balanced. If you look at the numbers, like the highest win percentage is like 51%, and the lowest is, Imperial Agents is at 41. But other than that, we don't have too many people actually below 45. Space Marines, weirdly enough, are below 45. They're 43, but they suffer from...
Really?
Space Marines as a whole suffers from a lot of the same things. Orcs as well. Is their intro armies. They're easy to collect. They're everyone's first army, so you have a lot of newbies showing up to tournaments with them. And orcs are just, they're orcs. They're fun. They're interactive. They're like a really enjoyable army to play. They have a lot of wacky like rules and like models, and a lot of people play them. And a lot of people play like heavy, fluffy lists, and they bring their Gork, they bring their Stompas, and stuff like that. Like. They're not going to win. Yeah. They're not going to win a tournament. They're just going to drag the numbers down. But they're just there to play their homebrew chapter or their warband or whatever. And Space Marines, like those type of armies, they suffer a lot from that. They almost never have a high win percentage. So when you do see Space Marines, especially Space Marines, up at like 50%, it's a problem because you have so many people kind of just kind of skewing the numbers down, that usually they're down around the like, hey, this looks really bad, but that's kind of where like just understanding it as a whole, like context comes in. And numbers don't really give you that specific context. That's just something I've kind of picked up personally and over time. But so Space Marines was...
I'm just surprised to hear that, because I know that Space Marines right now is like, I thought the numbers would get skewed up quite a bit with how they've been doing recently with the whole, like, +1 to wound Gilliman thing.
They were good for... So let me just pull their stuff up here. So up until January, they were living pretty much down around 40%.
Yeah.
40 to 42%. That. They were suffering bad. And they would they still get wins because there's so many players. They have so many players that just... through sheer numbers, they just get a lot of wins, and there's a lot of skilled players, and there's so many, like, and then back early in the edition as well, people were like playing Space Marines but using Blood Angels, and it was this really weird.
Bloodless Angels, yeah.
Yeah, the Bloodless, like, it's just really weird, like, kind of cheesing the system. So then they got their buffs around like Grotmist. They fixed them in that Christmas time, and they've been doing pretty well since. Now they've gone down a little bit because they did kind of nerf them a tiny bit, but those numbers. That's why they're kind of down there, because there's so much data for when they were really struggling. But as a whole, everything looks pretty good on a macro level. But when you look at it individually, things are like wildly different from data slate to data slate. You have things like Gene Sealer cults. They're anywhere from unplayable to, there was a whole data slate where their win rate was over 60%.
Yeah.
They were just
the final day, I think.
They were just bringing units back left, right, and center, and it was like they were broken, like it was bad. And then they nerfed them, and they were like average to irrelevant, and now they're kind of making a comeback. So but all those numbers as a whole, they balance out pretty evenly, and that's I think Games Workshop's doing a good job. As generally speaking, they're much more reactive than they used to be. It used to be like, here's a codex, you can deal with it for a year, when maybe we'll make a change if we feel like it. And you had to live with, if your codex came out and it was crap, you lived with that thing, and they might give you a points change once every 6 months. But it's also a double-edged sword, where they're just, Games Workshop's like releasing just, hey, here's a new detachment, more DACA. We think this is cool. I'm like, yeah, I bet you do think it's cool. Like, as soon as that came out,
oh, it's so wild, man.
Everyone's just like, what do you? This is clearly a problem, and it was very much a problem.
An interesting point in that was it really goes to show just how we don't understand, as much as we'd like to think that we do, what will affect the game state. Because one of the things that I held off, judging more DACA, was I remember when Star Shatter Arsenal came out and everyone was freaking out, and it turned out to just be okay. Like, it's a good detachment. And I was like, I want to wait to see what the more DACA consensus is, because I don't want to jump the gun. I feel like jumping the gun is what leads to a lot of the problems that we've had with 40k in general. When somebody will say something is busted, like say Skari, everyone will say, look at Drukhari, they're winning so much because of like the Void Ray gunship or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden we nerf something that really didn't need to get nerfed. Same with John Lennon with I forget the detachment, but it's Space Marines with the Storm Raven, that got nerfed, and it's like, why? You know what I mean? Now granted, they were correct about more DACA, but
yes.
I think that a lot of people like to jump the gun a little bit when it comes to making balance changes, and I think that's one of the criticisms about 10th as a whole. But I overall, like kind of what you were saying, I think that GW has been doing pretty well with balancing the game actively, but I also think that brings a lot of question as to things like, let's say it together, digital fucking rules at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to carry off what you were saying.
Yeah, I think I think they're doing, like you said, they are doing a much better job, but they're being a little too reactionary. They're putting something out, and they're not doing any testing, clearly. And then
it seems that way.
Broken, and they're like, oh, we got to fix it, and then they just make it irrelevant, and then you move on with your life. And that was a fun 1 month for Orcs players, and now it's like back to using like Warhorde or whatever they're using nowadays to win everything still. But it was clearly a problem, and clearly Games Workshop didn't do any internal testing to even try to figure it out. But these are the growing pains, I think, as the company transitions to something a little more like in this day and age from what they are. I mean, they're still way in the, printing codexes is a ridiculous thing to do.
Yeah, no kidding.
But we're getting there. And it's better than it's ever been. So hopefully they can learn from these mistakes, and hopefully some will come to their senses and give us some digital codexes, and get these things updated constantly. But it's evolving, and you can kind of see it, and you can kind of like the numbers get adjusted really quickly and spike really high or spike really low based on these sweeping changes they make. Sisters went from busted to brutal to okay to bad to okay. Orcs were like they were great. Like when that codex came out, everyone was running.
I remember, yeah.
everyone was running max mega knobs, and it was horrible. And then they nerfed it, and orcs, they were below average. And then Tactical Brigade came out, and then more DACA came out, and they've just been living large off of those. So,
yeah,
it's interesting to look at. It's hard to say as a whole. Like as a whole, they're doing a good job for the most part. No army ever runs away with anything. It's been a while since we've seen a Gene Stealer Cults with like 8 weeks of win rate of 60%. Like it's been 6 months since we've seen that, and I see that like every week. It's like, okay, everything's, it seems like I'm repeating myself when I make videos, but it's a good thing, because you don't want that, like one that's really high and one that's really low. It's not good for the game. It's good for those players. You want your army to do good, but it's not good for the game to have one or two things so broken it just ruins it for everyone else. So, but overall, I think everything is going pretty good. And one thing I have noticed, that I just made some quick charts here just to look at the armies who have had codex releases in Pariah Nexus. So we're talking Blood Angels, we're talking Tau, Eldari, and I guess technically Imperial Agents, they did release basically as Pariah Nexus started. But you look at like Blood Angels, since their codex came out, they've kind of been getting worse. Like,
really,
they were doing better as a whole. They had much higher highs as a whole with just the index. The codex came out and they sewered for about a month. Then they kind of got back up to around 50%, and it's been kind of a rough go lately. But then you look at their army rep, and their representation actually has gone up. So more people are playing them, but they're just not doing as well. And it's because they made a fun codex, I think. Like, people who play Blood Angels seem to enjoy it. I just don't think it has that punch, which is a big change from when you played in, like, 9th, when every time a new codex came out, it was just tactical nuke after tactical nuke. Every time, like, every army was topping the last one. It was horrible. And same as Tau, they've actually kind of gotten worse since their codex came out. It's kind of a dud, and it's interesting to see that Games Workshop's not just releasing these overpowered and broken codexes. For the most part, it feels like everyone looks at a codex and goes, okay, that's a good detachment. But these other 3 or 4 or 5, or 6 or 7, depending on what army you're playing, they look fun. They look usable, at least. But they're not broken. And, like, there hasn't been one army since Imperiah that has a codex come out that's just kind of broke everything. Eldari, to an extent, but that's one detachment devoted of you need. They're kind of ruining it a little bit, but it hasn't teetered into that like oppressive state yet. So people were worried. I got a lot of comments and videos about it, like everyone
I've seen
doomsaying it and talking about it, but it hasn't really led to like them dominating as much as people thought they were going to.
Yeah, because I know that the people were talking about what's the name of the spearhead
for
the fucking Scions one.
You talking?
Yeah, for guard.
For guard, let me get that here for you.
Bridge Spear Assault. Fuck, I forget the name, but
Bridgehead Strike.
Bridgehead Strike. Yeah, like they
yes. That was.
I remember like people were talking about like being scared of Eldar, but it was like, hey, like before Bridgehead got nerfed, obviously, like they were also contending up there with Eldar. Like it's not to say that they were like that the Unid was so far up that nobody could challenge them, as like we've seen with other armies like Mega Knobs or DACA.
They were a problem.
I think what's kind of crazy to me in terms of like talking about armies that aren't doing great right now with all the releases, especially one after their codex only had 4 detachments, but 2 they've received 2 very recently, is Tau, in the sense of like Tau, I remember just hearing like, oh, auxiliary looks fucking insane, dude, because you can do so much shenanigans with it, and we're nowhere with it. And experimental cadre, like the damage that you can do with the meltas in that detachment is actually fucking ludicrous.
Yeah.
And yet we are still running into a dud, and it's like, damn, like they really seem to be hit or missing with these army releases lately. I mean, I don't know if like you kind of mentioned that armies seem to be kind of like slowly doing, like very lightly doing worse with their codex release. But like I know that there's that kind of stipulation of like the A versus the B team, which I was a believer of for quite a bit, especially like, you know, AdMech versus Necrons was, I think, the very first iteration of that, because before that was Space Marines and Tyranids, and they were kind of like, you know, like Space Marines were good, Tyranids were okay, but it wasn't like as drastic as AdMech versus Necrons. And then after that, you had Custodes versus Orcs, right? And it just seems like there's always like one army that's kind of like a dud, and then the other one that's just like, holy shit, what were you guys thinking? You know? Which is why I wanted to cover the fact of like, you know, codex releases throughout the edition or throughout the data slate or the mission packs, because it kind of seems like one goes way the fuck up there and the other one goes way down.
Yeah, like it's funny with Tau, like the representations spiked up after they got their codex. Like everyone came back, and it's been going down ever since. Like everyone's like, whoops, this is not what I thought it was. But then you have
I'm not a fan of Tau either.
Yeah. Then you have Eldari. Theirs is like skyrocketed. People were like, you know, they're always a popular army, but like it was insane for a while there. They were like 11% of the representation, and same as Blood Angels. Like the codexes are bringing players in, but they're not dominating in the tournament results, which is kind of interesting. Like, it's just it's this departure from what we're used to seeing. I feel like as a game as a whole, that like codexes would come out and people would just be like, well, I guess I'm gonna go win now, because like you didn't even need to look at it, because you just knew they were gonna be great, because that's how they always just, you know, winning sells models. So
yeah, that's how people feel about Death Guard right now. That codex release is looking super spicy.
Yeah, there's a lot of I'm really curious, because they're in a good spot right now. They're actually, like I kind of mentioned it, like there's nothing wrong with Death Guard as a whole right now. So I'm curious to see if it's going to become a problem, or if there's something that they're just people tend to latch on to like one or two specific things and say, it's broken. But I don't know enough about Death Guard to know what's broken and where they're lacking. But it seems like it's going to be pretty good.
I think it's what it is, right? Again, I said this when I covered the review on stream, that I am going to hold off before saying it's broken, because it seems like, I will say it looks very strong, and it's because a lot of the things that army can do look really good on the face of it, right? Like right now people are talking about Death Shrouds with Lord of Contagion, because you can basically get on the charge with these Death Shroud Terminators, T7 4 wound bodies, right? They can deep strike within 6. They will have lethal hits, sustain hits, lance, and they are like strength 8 with 2 damage each, on top of the -1 contagion aura to reduce a save. Like, what I just said sounds busted as shit, right?
Yeah,
but like that's the issue with taking things at face value, because what I've noticed when I was playing AdMech is that you can do a lot of stacking, right? Like right now with AdMech, you could do your Corpuscari out of a boat with a Manipulus could do sustain hits 2, lethal hits, crit 5, AP -1, weapon skill 1, re-rolling wounds. That sounds fucking insane until you realize that it folds like a piece of paper, and you're not guaranteed those wounds. Like that's the reason why I think people are kind of like Shatterstar or Star Shatter. They're looking at it too much in face value, and they're probably going to be surprised when that army turns out not to be as great, because Death Guard, you know, while they are doing good right now, they're like middle of the pack. There was a point where they were like, I think 39% win rate, like way in the beginning of Pariah Nexus, and you know, they bounce back, and it's like, is this going to be a huge spike like we saw with Mega Knobs, or is it just going to be like okay, well that sounds really fancy until you screen them out, or yeah, they're 4 wound bodies, but they kill the thing in front of them, and then they don't do anything because they're Death Guard and they can only move 5, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's what I've noticed. That's what I've noticed the most with Death Guard, at least when I play them too. I would deep strike something with Death Shrouds, absolutely murder it, and then be like, alright, well, I guess I'm just stuck here for the rest of the game, and now the thing that I needed to get rid of is no longer a threat. Like, all the actions on the other side of the board, and now I don't have a way to get them over there. So,
and you have
it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and you've got like people who adapt, and you learn to screen, and you learn to like throw sacrificial units out there, and like, you know, if you're good screening, if you're good like and good at manipulating the board state, you can keep them away. Like, okay, charge my unit of Fleshhounds. I don't care. Like, I'll just gonna pick up my 2 units next to it and leave you all by yourself. You can have fun with that 200 or however expensive unit is, all by itself. So there's ways around it.
I think. Yeah, and I think like I remember like looking at Shadow Legion and being like, this looks fucking insane. Like giving Possessed Deep Strike on top of having Demon data sheets, that looks crazy. And as far as I know, they haven't been like warping the game either. So,
no, they've been pretty chill. It looked like a really good detachment, and it's a good detachment, but it's not a broken detachment, and that's what you want.
And I think people are just highlighting the strengths without highlighting the weaknesses. Which is what leads to some hasty decisions when it comes to rebalancing. Another reason why we shouldn't just look at win rate, but we should look at cumulative stats overall to paint a good picture. And that's when it helps to know like what an army does. Like one thing that I see not only in your videos, but like in Auspec's tactics and all their videos is that whenever they're covering stats, they're always just saying like, oh, this army needs a bunch of help, and it's like, well, I mean, they're 49% win rate. Like, they're not that bad, right? But it's because everyone is so willing to look at like what's bad about it, right? Like, even I know that AdMech isn't in a good place, but I do know that they have their good months and their good weeks, and I know what makes the units good. So as much as I can say that the army is shit, I can also say Ruststalker's moving 30 inches through terrain and can slice up a leader and one-shot Abaddon is kind of insane. You know what I mean? It's all within the context of what's going on in the game and what you can do, which surprises me sometimes with things like Tau getting so much support lately and still in the shitter. Like, that's, I don't know, every single time I check your videos, I'm just like, damn, they're still down there.
I know.
Like,
I think,
which sucks because I love Tau. I one of the first armies I played was Tau, and I still really like Tau. It's just that this edition they're just kind of weird. Which kind of brings the credence of like when their codex released, you noticed there was a downward spike on their player rate because it looks cool. Like Kao Yan looks really, really cool in concept, but then I'm just like the guiding system is kind of weird, and like the fact that Riptides are as cheap as they are, it's like, dude, this is a fucking Riptide battlesuit. This thing is this was the bane of people's existence, and now it's like a wet noodle. It's like a little statue basically. Where like triple Riptide was basically majority of your list, and now you can run 3 and not even dent 700. You can't even get past 500 points with 3 Riptides. I don't think. I think they're 190 right now, so just a little over. But I don't know. That's just crazy to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I'm hearing, like people's comments and stuff in the videos, is like they took everything that made Tau like interesting and like unique and just sort of gave it away as special as like universal rules, like split fire and all that stuff. Like back in the day, they were one of the only armies that could actually do a lot of these things, and they had go through a lot of hoops, like you said, with the AdMech, or like marker lights, and do a bunch of stuff, but it all led to them really hitting hard. Yeah, they don't do if you're going to be a one phase army, you have to do that phase really well, and if you're like not going to take care of business in your phase, you're not going to have any success. You're just going to play these like, I'm just going to play to score points, like I'm just this action monkeys, and like just forget trying to kill people. I'm just out there like running around trying to score objectives, and that's a way to play the game, but it's also like not really intuitive to how the game is supposed to be played. Like you want your stuff to do things, like that's kind of the fun of it, right?
Yeah, otherwise it seems like you're kind of playing solitaire. I don't. Do you play any like Magic the Gathering at all?
I mean, I played years and years and years ago. I know the references, but I don't play personally.
Gotcha. So like I was playing, I want to say like 5 days ago, I was playing Storm in Commander, and as I like to tell people, like when I play Storm, it gets to the point where I play solitaire and I'm just playing by myself. Like you can very quickly turn a game that's supposed to be about 4 people with interaction into you just playing off the top of your deck, and I feel like some of those armies, AdMech I think is one of them, and I know that Tau is like that because I've played Tau in 10th edition, where you don't really interact with your opponent. Like you are doing things simply to progress yourself in the board state, and your opponent is just an obstacle as which to get you there. Like that's one of the criticisms I have so much about our elites is that like Taraxi, they have shoot and scoot. I don't care if my Taraxi live or die. I don't care if they go in front of a Space Marine or if they go in front of Gilliman himself. What I need to know is that can I shoot that target to move 6 inches? I don't care who you are. I just need to shoot you, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot like Tau is kind of the same way with like Fire and Fate of I think it's called this Torchstar Gambit in Retaliation Cadre. It's just like listen, I just need to like I don't care what I'm shooting at. I just need to get over there, and I don't care what these guys do. I just need to make sure that they do this action. Whereas I remember when I played 8th edition and 8th edition? Yeah, 8th edition Tau, I was playing Borkin, which is like the missile detachment, which is why I was so excited for Experimental Cadre. And I remember my friends being terrified of fucking broadsides. Like, broadsides are still good, but there are a lot of things that you lost, like, say, Overwatch on 5s, that, you know, aren't a thing that AdMech or that the Tout has anymore, because they just kind of got rid of it, and they didn't really do much to like replace that stuff that made them unique. I know that there was a lot of criticism about, you know, Overwatching all the time for free. Like, yeah, I can understand that. Tau is kind of a victim of like having a lot of design problems, but again, kind of like you mentioned, when you're a one-phase army, you need to make sure that when you're in that one phase, you do everything you need to do. I think Tau kind of catches a lot of flack for being a, you know, a one phase army and shooting and just blowing people out of the water, but then you look at something like World Eaters, you know, that just the moment they do get close to them, you know, Tau folds like a piece of paper and nobody's critiquing World Eaters. They're just like, oh, no, I just don't like getting shot off the board, basically.
Yeah.
But it's man, I mean, I kind of feel the same with AdMech. We used to be the, you know, as I say a lot, premier shooting army. We used to, like, I remember one-tapping Catans with Breachers back in 9th edition. And now, yeah, now we're at a point where it's just like, you know, S3 on Taraxi, you know, Destroyers basically kill themselves until the rule where they made it so that it's 3 mortal wounds and not just straight up destroying a model for plasma.
Oh, yeah.
I think Tau kind of suffers a lot of the same things that AdMech does, where it's like they have high strength weapons at the very least, or not high strength, sorry, high damage weapons, but their strength is like so shit that they can't even contest themselves as like as a shooting army anymore, because now they're very movement based. That's why everyone plays Retaliation Cadre, because of like Torchstar Gambit and like Shoot and Scoot and stuff like that. Because one of the things, like, Monka is one of their best attachments, but like once you get past turn 3, it's over. Like, you lose all your lethality, and now you're just back to throwing models in front of things and trying to play the objective game, and that just kind of goes against what people ended up liking Tau for, which was big battlesuit that actually has a gun to be afraid of, is now a Riptide that doesn't do anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have something over toughness 10 or 11, you're not really worried about it too much.
Yeah, it's very much like the Great Unclean One. Like, he just sits there and is annoying, but he's not a threat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's a distraction piece. If you wanna attack him, go ahead. But he's just gonna sit there. You can play around him. He's not gonna do anything. But
yeah. But I mean, the Daemons at least has some support into being able to influence the game. Where like I feel like Tau doesn't really have that right now. Sometimes they do, like the Fusion Blade Cold Star Commander combo on the Experimental Cadre. I saw in Art of War 1-tap Aguo, which is fucking insane.
Yeah,
but, you know,
they're pretty tough right now.
Right, but kind of going back, I know we kind of went on a tangent there. We kind of went over the fact of how you like to look at tournaments that have a substantial, I guess, player base and sufficient rounds to draw data from. Is there anything else that you kind of look at that maybe you either include or don't include in your data to try to draw a better picture of like the game's health as a whole? So I know you mentioned like no short tournaments. I think that's all I kind of got. Is there anything in addition to that?
I think a lot of my like information like outside of just the numbers comes from like listening to people and like seeing like like in discords and talking to different people and seeing like what like each. No, I can't get a good read on every army. Like I don't know every army inside out. Like that's just too much. But you can get an idea of you listen to like someone who's a top player talk about their experience doing this, and it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. And then you can look at that information from someone who plays it at an elite level and understands the game in that way and say, okay, how does that look? How do I look at their army or a army with that lens? Like if I look at it as a whole, it kind of starts to gives you a little picture, paints a picture of like why an army might be succeeding or failing. Because when it comes down to it, those elite players and those people who win tournaments, they have everything refined down to the point, right? Like that is building a list is like, that's the important part. Like that's the biggest part of any, really, when it comes down to winning, is really building that like ideal list to your specific playstyle or to the army's playstyle. And if you can, and that's kind of why like Space Marines always kind of suffer, because there's just so many options and so many lists, and people, I really like Redemptor Dreads, or I really like Terminators, Centurions, you know, they just, so you get so much of it and it just doesn't turn into like cohesive like results across the board, whereas you get like sort of niche armies that have maybe like Gene Stealer cults is one of those armies. Like there's one way to play that army, and everybody who's good at it plays it that one way, and they do either really really well when they have rules that allow them to play that. They're a problem because they're one of those like finesse armies, and if you know what you're doing, you could really break that and abuse it. And there's those kind of armies tend to have those kind of results where you don't really see like a lot of the other armies that are just more like Necrons. They were a problem, but they were a problem because they had a couple broken data sheets early in the edition with Catan, Wraiths and Catan, just ruining it for like that's just oppressively powerful, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it kind of just skews the data. So you have to take context. You have to take like people's experiences and sort of understand them, like, because numbers give you an idea of what's happening, but it doesn't give you, and you can get like a good context out of it. You can understand how like results are happening. Oh, okay, so they have a low win percentage to high XOX1. So okay, there's probably a group of people who really know what they're doing and are really winning a lot of tournaments, and there's something there with that army that a select few people know what to do. And it's not something for everybody, but you have to understand that there is play with that army that people might look at and go, oh, they have a 45% win rate, they're garbage. Yeah, as a whole they're garbage, but if you know what you're doing, they're really a problem. But
yeah, I think when I saw Emperor's Children and I saw that army rule, I was like, this is one that's going to gate like the boys from the men, because that army rule looks like it is an absolute nightmare if somebody knows how to like play against or play with it, right? And kind of to go to your point is like looking at Flawless Blades, I was like, oh, these guys are just strong. Like, it doesn't matter whether you know how to abuse advance and charge and shoot and advance, whatever the fuck. It doesn't matter, because like Flawless Blades are just going, you point them at what you need gone, and they're going to get rid of it. But then, you know, you have like the rest of your army that can utilize the army rules so well that, you know, if somebody really knows how to play with it, then that army is going to have an insane win rate, kind of like GSC. But if they don't, then, you know, they're just going to fall apart.
Yeah, like strong data sheets are going to get you a good win rate. Strong rules and interactions and combos are going to get you tournament wins. Are going to get you high like XOX1 percentage. That's where you're going to be able to get that advantage over people who just have strong data sheets, because you're going to be able to do things that the average person doesn't know how to do or can't think about, and you're going to get those wins, and you're going to win those tournaments that like most people just like, I would never be able to do that, I'm not that good of a player. but people who are like, you know, I talk to some Demon players who play competitively, and it's like, oh, that's how you think of it? Oh my god, okay, that makes a lot of sense, but I would have never got there. And you know, so I use the numbers, and I try to take as much anecdotal evidence and make those numbers and give some context to the numbers. But at the end of the day, like that's where my sort of expertise is, or my knowledge comes from, is just looking at it and saying, okay, this is what it means, and this is what I'm seeing, and this is week over week how it's going. So there is a problem here, there isn't a problem here. People might be overreacting because of one bad week or one bad month.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying 100%. I think that I mean, good rules are definitely going to help people, but I think at some point you're going to get to the, I guess, the wall, if you want to call it that, where you just kind of like, are you being carried by the army, or like, are you carrying the army, or is the army carrying you, you know, so to speak? Like some people think like that it kind of just plays itself. One example for that is like what's the name of this fucking army? Creations of Bile, right? Like it's a very strong army, but like a lot of people are just like, oh, you increase your weapon skill by 1, like what's the thing that makes it so strong if you can't even get to combat? And like, for instance, I saw a pro player, I think it was in teams for Battle for Salvation, he was saying how what he can do with this squad, I think it was like Fabius, Bile, and Chosen or something, or maybe it was Possessed. No, I think it was Chosen, because Fabius Bile can't lead Possessed. But he was saying that he can do a combo with like killing one of his models with a stratagem that does D3 wounds, and it kills the little servant of Fabius Bile. So what he can do is use the stratagem, sacrifice that little guy, but then that little guy can resurrect, and he can resurrect 2 inches in front of anywhere where he died. So what you would be able to do then is give your unit an additional buff at the cost of the little dude, put that little dude 2 inches forward, and then now have 2 inches increased to your advance and charge. And it was like, holy fuck, dude, that's genius. You know what I mean? Like +2 to charge is very, very strong for 1 CP point, while also buffing your unit and basically losing 0 of the damage output. All of which to say that like it's really impressive when you see somebody be able to do something like that, and you can't really point at that to say, oh, CSM is too strong. You know what I mean? Like, Chosen deserve nerfs, because that is such a pro level way of thinking of things, as opposed to just being like, okay, maybe Wraiths are a little too strong, or maybe Katana are just a little too self-sufficient, right?
Yeah.
Because now you're taking the game to that extreme where it's not about the army being, it is about the army being strong, but it's also about how can you intuit situations to a way to lead you to victory, as opposed to, say, I don't know, just pointing at something and being like, haha, I have sustain 2 because I played more Daka, right? Like there is no thought of that level of like the Creations of Bile player when you played more Daka in that way. Maybe with Assault if you want to argue that, but no, I don't think that you can even like compare the two, and I would think it's unfair, sort of like the Scary thing, where here's this super underplayed unit, but since that guy took advantage of it, and now I'm taking that as a personal account for Drukhari being busted, we should nerf it. And it's like, come on, man, you know what I mean? Like, clearly, people are using something to a level beyond casual play. I don't think that that's a good metric to be like, okay, well, let's add this to the chart to therefore show that this army needs a buff or a nerf, right? Now, if people take too much advantage of it, then maybe. But I don't think that's usually an issue, personally.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting to see how, like, people react to, like, pro player and competitive play, especially recently, because I know a lot of people are kind of saying like, oh, 10th edition is taking away the more fluffy side of Warhammer because it's too competitively focused. I don't know if you agree with that sentiment or not, but my idea here is like, yeah, maybe, right? But I feel like a lot of like the things that the fluffy players want are like way too fluffy, to the point where it's just like, I get it's a dice game, I get you want to have fun, but if you're going to have this, like, I guess almost a double standard of judging the game to being too competitive while also looking at something that is kind of trivial and then saying like, oh, well, obviously their win rate is too high and this is the reason why, when it's clearly not, let's nerf it. And it's just kind of like, I don't think that things should be nerfed simply because you had a bad experience with one army rule or another, when it just turned out that somebody was very knowledgeable and advanced in charge with, Court of the Conceited or or not court, that's a detachment, sorry, army rule of the Emperor's Children or something like that. Like there has to come a point where you have such a level of skill with an army or a detachment or something that you have to acknowledge that it's the player and not the detachment that needs the nerf, right? And you can't really nerf a player. It just so happens that they executed things very well, and I don't think that that's grounds to then nerf something simply because you point at a chart, you know what I mean? Which is why I value things like your consolidated charts of stats or your meta health analysis, especially the faction cards, man. Those things are fucking incredible because it basically is like a little one-stop shop of like, this is how my army is doing compared to everyone else. I don't have to get confused about any other value or anything. I know that this is where they stand, and then you can kind of draw a picture from that, right? Especially because you color code them, and I like color coded stuff.
Yeah, those are my little babies. I was very very happy with how those turned out, and I'm proud of those. I think I like them. It just gives you context within the army, and then against the meta as a whole, and you can just look at it and say, okay, here's where I stand. Here's the averages. Here's where I'm at. Here's all my detachments, what they're doing. You know, it's everything you need for the most part, right there, and then you can just take what you need and move on. You don't have to get bogged down by looking at everything else, which can be a little cumbersome sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too because you can always look at an army and say like, this is why their win rate is so high, but then not cover as to why that might be. Because I think a lot of the times there is an issue of say, let's use Skitarii Hunter Cohort as an example. Before we got Halo screwed, that Skitarii Hunter Cohort was the best way to play AdMech, right? And it had I think after the data slate, when we got our giant buff, AdMech was like getting like a 52 to 54% win rate, because, you know, people were playing him a lot. It was a pretty substantial buff for the most part. And it's very easy to then look at a chart and be like, wow, AdMech's 54, they're very strong now. But once you peel back the layers and see that it's only Skitarii Hunter Cohort, and that if you were to nerf that, then the army becomes basically unplayable because everything else is so dog shit, right?
Yeah.
That I think that helps change the perspective of they need to nerf Skitarii Hunter Cohort to they need to buff everything else to be better and more in line. And then once you do that, you can draw a picture as to where Skitarii Hunter Cohort stands. Because when everyone is going to one thing, I had the same criticism with triple Triptide, right? Back in 8th, people were saying Triptide is annoying. I hate playing against it. And it's like, you have to realize that people are only playing Triptide because everything else in Tau is garbage. Like, that is why people were doing that. Tau was widely known as one of the worst armies in 8th edition when I started playing. And it's because, like, now people are having to lean to doing a strategy that is so shit that it's the only perceivable way to play the army. And that's why I really like the faction data cards, because sometimes I'll be like, why is this army doing so good or whatever? I'll look at it and then have more context of like, oh, it's just one detachment that's really carrying them. And I would imagine that getting rid of whatever that is going to substantially hurt the army's health, where they could just choose to bring things more in line rather than hit the nail in the head with a hammer and like break it, you know, for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, like, just as a quick example, like looking at like the orcs, like even after all the nerfs, like Mordaka has 40% of the players this whole entire data slate, and they have a 65% win rate. Like, that's a huge percentage of player base, and that's a huge win rate. The next highest is Warhorde with 30%, and they're only at a 46% win rate. So if you were to like, yeah, and that's like, they have a couple things like up around 50, but there's such low percentage of players, you can't take anything from that. It's just one or two people doing good with it. Like, Cult of Speed has a 60% win rate, but they've got like 2 players total, maybe. I can't even see I can't even see their sliver on the representation chart. So if you adjust orcs as a whole, you're gonna ruin everything, because, you know, the faction or the players can't pay for the sins of one detachment. Like, you have, like, you know, just because Skari's good doesn't mean every Dark Elder player has to suffer.
Right. Yeah.
you need to fix one. You need to, you know, go in with precision and tweak the things that need tweaking. You don't need to just sweep across and say, fixed it. You know, then it's going to ruin it. Yeah, and that's when you have things where just armies like sisters.
Yeah,
they just become unplayable, right? Like, they just go from they're broken, but they're broken for a very specific reason, and you sweep everything across, and now they're just useless. They're unplayable. Like, they're just. And then you have to give everything back, and you have to build them back up. And now they're building them back up slowly, as opposed to the big, like, big nerf hammer they slammed down on them. So they're kind of taking the approach they should have taken from the start to nerf them. They're using that to build them back up, and it's just, I don't know how much Games Workshop looks into specific data. I feel like they don't. I feel like they just see a win rate, and I don't even know where they get their data from.
Yeah.
And they're just like,
they catch a vibe.
Yeah, exactly. How many angry emails do we have from people at tournaments? Let's fix that.
Yeah. Well, hey, maybe they'll see enough angry emails to bring back Chaos Demons.
Maybe they will.
Yeah. But it's so interesting, like, because I haven't really been that much of a competitive player for a very long time. Even now, I would consider myself like casually competitive. You know what I mean? In the sense of like, I like to dip my feet into it. I like to see streams. I like to see what's going on, what everyone is doing. But I'm by no means like, chasing the meta or anything. I mean, hell, if you've watched my streams, anything to go by, I make lists based on how silly I want to be. Sometimes I'm like, I want to bring 3 onagers and sit on protector. Let's make it happen, right? But looking at the scene is an entirely different thing, because you either have the people who are looking at it from the perspective of their army, or the people that look at it in an eagle's eye view, which I think is the healthiest way to look at things, because it's very easy to get into the slums about how bad your army is or how the game is being handled when you're looking at it in the perspective of your army. I think that's something that if I wasn't playing such a shit army, I would not have ever kind of opened my eyes to, because it's very easy to like be biased, right? We've seen it with like Auspex and stuff. A lot of comments in his videos basically being like, hey, this army needs to get fixed, and it's like, what are you talking about? Like, like in the context of everything, it looks like a really good army. And then you have people who like enjoy a playstyle of, say, like AdMech. There's some people who really do like the Horde playstyle, and it's like, you have to understand that people didn't buy into this army expecting that, right? And that's where that I guess dissent comes from, of like, we don't like this army because of X, and then somebody who's newer may not understand that, and then again digging into the point of somebody who doesn't understand, say, why orcs is strong, will then look at Mordaka and be like, oh, that's why, right? Nerf it. And then now the game is in a substantially worse place because they nerfed it, which they should do, but they didn't fix anything alongside with it to make sure that army isn't immediately drowning, right? Which is one of the criticisms that I levied against the changes to Sisters, where I was like, listen, I understand. Again, Sisters hater. I know that Sisters was way the fuck up there and they deserve to get knocked down. And the fact that they're crying about getting knocked down, I had the same sentiment towards Custodies, because they used to be one of the strongest indexes. Then their codex comes out, and now all of a sudden they're crying. And it's like, but I can also understand the sentiment of like, well, I don't think it's right? I don't think it's right to just nerf them so hard to where there's nothing else to lean back on. And I think that is one of the biggest criticisms I have about 10th when it comes to looking at the numbers, because obviously I don't know every army, kind of like you mentioned, but looking at the numbers and drawing the best line of logic that I can by being able to look at like your products and stuff, is to say they've been a little bit too fast at nerfing shit, sometimes deserved. So like, Mordaka definitely deserved. But sometimes they go a little too quick without doing any compensation, and they seem to be very slow to bring things back up, right? Yeah. Like, Custodies is doing well now, but I don't think it was due to the buff to the fucking jet bikes and the grenade launchers. I think it was due to Lions of the Emperor. But like, AdMech went a very long time without a buff, and even now we're still kind of like, okay, we kind of need another one, right? And I think like shit, what was that other army? GSC took a while too. Like, GSC, ended up being a little bit more busted when people started figuring things out, but it took a couple of detachments to get them there, and a couple of points changes and stuff. Yeah. And they seem to be rather slow on those, but they seem to be rather quick to like knock down everything else. So I don't know what the deal with that is. I think it's an issue of like kind of what they do with other armies, where they're just like, oh, well, we're gonna release this product and then see that nobody sells it, so now we don't care about the army, right? They're just kind of like drawing maybe opinions in a wrong way. It's kind of hard to tell without being them, right? Maybe they do just look at their email box and just say like, hey, that's what they're angry about, fucking go feed the peasants. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? It's it's so hard with them. They're all over the place on everything. It's hard to grasp really what the vision is sometimes.
Yeah. Well, kind of drawing things to an end here. I wanted to ask, like, where do you think 10th edition is for you personally?
Well, I think personally it's in a pretty good spot. I feel like most armies like have had their moments and have had usable army. Like I've played in editions where it's been real bad, and there's been armies that just like, you know, people talk about how oppressive something is, and it was actually that way. Like, you know, I think it was 8th edition with Daemons. You could have like the Screamer Bomb. I can't. It's been a while, but you know, a 3+ a rerollable invulnerable save kind of situation, and like, and there's been a lot of times where things are just where they didn't care. They just released rules and then moved on and waited, and it ruined the game. So I think as a whole, it's in a much better place. They're doing the right things. They just need to fine-tune how they're doing them. And I think we've seen it get better over the course of 10th edition. We've seen more tweaks come in here and there when things are broken, as opposed to just waiting until the data slate comes out. You know, oh, something's broken. Well, you got to wait the next 3-4 months. You just got to live with it. We don't really see that anymore. I don't really see armies with consistently, you know, really high win rates, or I do see some with consistently really low, which is also also a problem. But people complain about being in a bad spot, but people really complain about stuff that's like winning too much and is too good. So I think overall they're keeping that, like, the ceiling is not as high, the floor's pretty low, but there's no one's running away with it consistently, and it just makes for I think it's a little bit more balanced as a whole, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, and I think again, GW really should adopt digital rules to make people feel less bad about their purchases and stuff, especially when you're going to become so I guess interactive with how much you are changing the game time to time. And I think sometimes it's fine. I think, like, a lot of people ask for emergency nerfs on things without letting the dust settle first, right? Again, Star Shadow Arsenal as an example. But sometimes they do have to press the button, as with DACA. But even then, I don't think that, like, something having an extremely high win rate, kind of like you mentioned with Emperor's Children in your last video, that, like, let's see where it settles, because that's usually how it tends to happen when a codex gets released. So I think they've been doing good. The reason I asked that question is because I've been seeing, not lately, but like I'd say in the last like 3 months, a lot of people talking about why they don't like 10th edition. And that goes way beyond like the stats of how an army is doing. That goes down to like terrain setups and yada, yada, yada. But I think it's interesting to draw that opinion from people, because I feel like as much as people like to say that 10th edition might be a little stale, might be a little bit too homogenous or whatever, everyone does say that it's a good edition, right? And I'd agree with them in that regard too. I'm not much for like fluff stuff too much. Sometimes I'll just kind of like wander a little bit into it, but I think that 10th edition has met a really good line. I do understand the sentiment that things get a little boring sometimes. I haven't been able to put my finger on it though, but I don't think it's the Chaos Boon table giving you a Demon Prince for free. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's a good question to always kind of like end things on, because I like to imagine that as much as GW gets hate, and a lot of it, in my opinion, is deserved, we are sitting here recording a podcast about it for a reason. It's because we love the game, right? Yeah. So I think that GW has done a very good job in that regard. Now, if only they could stop killing demons, that would be great. I think that would make me really happy. Hell, I don't even play demons, and I feel like I'm fighting a fight for them. So yeah, but yeah, no, that I think that about wraps it up, unless you have anything else you kind of want to touch on.
I think we've covered pretty much everything that I think we wanted to cover.
Sweet. All right, well, before we wrap up, please plug yourself one more time so people know where to find you.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. Channel is Warp Friends. Weekly tournament result meta updates if you haven't grabbed that already from the podcast. I do have the website wordpress.com/workfriends, and that's just the charts and the Army 1-page charts and stuff like that. That's just sort of a static thing you can just go check. That's updated every week. And like I said, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/workfriends. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. Come join as a free member if you want, and just hang out.
Yeah, for sure. And congrats on 1,000 subs, right? It's been a battle.
You too. Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm aiming for 10 now, right? We got to aim for digit 5. So I remember breaking 100 and then being like, holy shit, I'm almost to 1,000. And I think that gap is only going to get bigger for us.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no.
I mean, hey, you have an infinite well of content. As long as the game's alive, you can keep going.
Exactly.
And and I'm sure people are gonna keep tuning in because, like I said, I do think that your videos are fucking nailing the head on the. However you say it. They're nailing the fact. Yeah, they're doing a great job at capturing the data that people do care about and the ones that they definitely should, because the reason that I wanted to do this was to let people know what is it that they should be looking at, right? I think that's going to be a very important part of understanding your content and appreciating it to the fullest value, which I know my Discord does, and I'm sure that people will continue to appreciate your content in the future, man. So yeah, 100%, you deserve the 1,000 followers, and continue to success to you. But yeah, that does it for us today. Thank you guys for watching. If again, please go check out Warp Friends. He's on our Discord if you ever want to ask him questions about stats. He's usually pretty happy to send it to us. You know, hopefully we can get a little bit more of these podcasts out with guests. I think this should be a pretty exciting thing to have. I mean, hell, maybe we'll have you back some other day.
Maybe
talking about some stats that if there's another Mordaka, like what the hell is going on with the stat. But that does it for this video, guys. If you appreciate it and you like the video and the content, like and subscribe. I would appreciate that, to try to get us both to our goal of 10K. And I think that does it. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for watching. Bye bye. A huge thank you to all my patrons in the Engineer tier, and a special thank you to the Fabricator tier with 3x01, Atura, Dr. Jones, Eric Neisner, Mula, Outlasted Magos, Rising Grace, Sekartor, Snoofalufagus, Sig Lawson Jr., Nikito, and Tech Priest Thorns. Thank you guys.